as we sit here, as you sit here, can you sense your own presence? That's not a very good way of putting it, because it's not your own. You don't even exist as a separate entity, as separate from the totality. Can you sense? But let's just for the moment put it like that. Can you sense your own presence throughout the body? Because presence is not a head phenomenon. Head is part of it, but so are the toes and the entire energy field. Presence is a whole body phenomenon, although it transcends the body and it's not part of the phenomenal world. But whatever words we use come from the phenomenal world, so it's okay. So there is something that one cannot grasp or say, here it is. Because if you say, here it is, you've made an object out of it in consciousness, a concept, an idea. Here it is. And yet presence is consciousness itself. So you can never say, here it is. Who is saying here it is? All you can say is, here I am. As presence. There's also, presence is not confined to the inner. Ultimately it's just an artificial division between inner and outer. There's presence in the room, a field of presence. So it's within and without. So this is an entry point into presence, is the feeling of your inner energy field. Alive. Cells are alive. When you feel that, you can't think very much. The moment you start to think, you lose that, because consciousness moves up and you're up here. It's quite possible that body awareness was one of the original teachings of the Buddha. Some people claim that, nobody ultimately knows. But there are some sutras that point to that. As is probably the awareness of breathing, and they are closely connected, because if you follow your breath with your attention moves into the body. And you can then feel parts of the body as you follow your breath with your attention. As you breathe in, it seems almost as if the breath were reaching even into your legs or feet, although science would probably tell you, well, you're not actually breathing into your legs, but the attention moves there. Whenever you are tortured by obsessive thoughts, or any kind of thoughts, a never-ending stream of pointless thinking, which is most of the time, use the inner body as an entry point into presence. And you may notice the first thing, if the mind is very active, Or you're faced with a challenging situation and the mind wants to react out of its old conditioning. The mind will say, I can't be present in the body. Not now, I can't be present now, not now. Wait until I feel a little better, until things have changed. I haven't got the time now. Can't even think about it, can't be present now. And then you do it anyway. Feel your hands, arms, feet. Take a few deep breaths and follow the breath with your attention into the body. And quickly you feel an aliveness in the inner energy field. And there's your anchor for presence. And then presence becomes a globalized sense of aware aliveness. And there you are. And a few minutes ago the mind told you that you can't do it. If you believe that thought every time it comes, then you'll never go into the body because I'll do it some other time. I have too much on my mind now. And there you are. So this is to practice also when things are easy in your life, like now, relatively easy, except for one or two people who may have an ache or a pain. And that's okay, it's somewhere in the body. There are other parts of the body that are fine. There's still the global feeling of aware presence. So there is sensing yourself as that presence here. Your awareness is then partly here, in here, so to speak, and partly on the outer world, which at this moment is not challenging, it's helpful. That's good. You can hear the words, you can perceive the room perfectly well, you can see the flowers, the lights, aware of everything, but aware also of the presence that you are, without which nobody would be aware of this room and this voice. It wouldn't even be there. There would just be atoms and molecules floating around, with mostly empty space in between. So you create this world as the conscious presence every moment. But don't lose yourself in the creation. But since that has happened, that also had its place and its purpose. God as yourself, the one consciousness, the one life, must have wanted to lose itself in the creation and then wake up. And then know him, her, itself. It's a cosmic thing, not just little personal. It's huge. You're part of something huge. So as you sit here, some awareness is within the aliveness, the presence that you are, as the consciousness in which whatever you perceive appears. And that means you're deeply rooted in being. And the rest is existence. Being is that which is not manifested as a form, the underlying one life. Existence is that, the word already tells you that, it's that which stands out. Ex ist from Latin, stands out. Ex, out. So that which exists is a form that comes out of the unmanifested and manifests as a thought, as a body, as a solar system, the galaxy, or blade of grass, or micro. So existence is whatever you can perceive with the senses, and beyond there are other things that you cannot perceive, that's also existence. Spirit presences also exist. Devas, nature spirits, exist, although most humans can't sense these things, see them anymore. Gods probably exist. Gods, beings, angels, whatever you want to call them, all kinds of entities, and yet they exist. They may be deeply rooted in being. They may not be under the illusion that they are separate little entities, and yet they exist. They can be and exist at the same time. They can be rooted in this one source of all life and be out as an acting agent in the sense-perceived world. And we are learning that also. Nature also is rooted deeply in being, but at an earlier stage, natural connectedness with being without yet knowing it fully. So this is a very powerful way of connecting with being, connecting with your body. It's more than body. The invisible life that animates the body, the intelligence field. And then it's so much easier to go about this world without needing to label everything immediately. As soon as it enters your field of perception, some automatic thing comes into motion that comments on it, how absurd, and interprets it immediately to fit into what I need and what I want and what my story is and what my old likes and dislikes are, and immediately you have a running commentary on everything you see. It's a bit like almost like the robot from the future in some of these films by our friend Arnold. And so this robot from the future comes, and then sometimes the viewer of the film looks through his eyes, and whenever he sees a new situation, his field of vision is like a computer screen, and then the computer screen analyzes the situation. Male weighing such and such height, approaching at such and such a speed, carrying a submachine gun, level of threat 9, and all kinds of quick analysis. Now, if anybody had to do that, they would be very slow. If you had to analyze analytically every situation, imagine driving a car like that. That's why even the most powerful computer in the world cannot yet drive a car from A to B in a small town. Just can't do it. And a human doesn't need to be particularly intelligent, it seems, to be able to do that. But this breaking it down into little bits of information is almost how the human mind, the conditioned mind, when you're lost in it, how it operates. You meet somebody and immediately you start formulating opinions and judgments and compare him or her with yourself and see where he or she fits in. Are you better, higher, more spiritual, more wealthy, better looking, stronger? Or you feel inadequate or feel better. Oh, there's this game, and perhaps I can add her to my sense of self. I can make her my wife and she'll look good next to me. It sounds absurd, but that's how the mind works. And of course you're not meeting anybody at all, you're meeting your own thoughts. Continuously you think you're interacting, you're having relationships with other human beings. You're only having a relationship with your mind. and then you marry her or him, and she has the same problem. A little later, they can't stand each other anymore. Two minds meeting. So that compulsion to go about the world and, according to your conditioning, immediately interpret everything and immediately have an opinion about it. And I'm always perplexed when, after somebody asks me, what do you think of this person, such and such, that perhaps I have just met or whatever. Oh, nothing. What is there to think? If you think about their conditioning, their whatever conditioned behavior they manifest, that's only a bundle of conditioning. There's nobody there. That's not who they are. So ultimately, whatever you can think about in the other person, that's not who they are. What you cannot think about in the other person, that's who they are and who you are. You conceptualize yourself as an entity that consists of mental positions and mental images and concepts, and me, story of me, and then you do it to others. So being here as an alive presence, the pull is greatly reduced, the pull to label everything immediately. When you sense, when you in the background, the presence that you are, entire being that you are, and you sense that as the presence, and then you perceive, then the need to label is hardly there. Still occasionally little thoughts may drift in and out, that's okay. But to a large extent you will be able to be there as a higher intelligence, because that's what it is, the unconditioned intelligence that is presence. And not be there as a little personalized entity that says me. No matter how intelligent, how developed my mind is, you're still a little egoic me, wanting something or fearing something. And so that is particularly when you meet human beings, because we've been talking about being present with nature, being present with a tree and a flower, and look without needing to call it anything, unless you have to say something to someone. But in the act of perception, there's the background of aware stillness. And that's relatively easy. Nature is not actively thinking, it's not conducive to thought. It becomes more difficult when you meet humans, because most humans are noisy minds. That's who they think they are. They're walking around with noisy minds. And immediately it's very challenging to meet another human being, because you're meeting, in most cases, an egoic entity. They don't know who they are. They think they are their story. And they think they need this and that to fulfill themselves. And they fear all kinds of things. And they interpret you through the eyes of their conditioning. And so in the interaction with humans, it's essential to be there as presence and not as a labeling mind. And so if you can sense the inner body when you're facing another human being, somebody you've never met before, somebody you know already, doesn't matter. Somebody you're meeting very briefly, and there's a moment in which perhaps you ask, can you tell me where such and such a street is? You're stopping a stranger in the street. Can you tell me where such and such a street is? And he or she says, it's over there, they go that way. And there's a moment of perhaps 3 seconds in which you just look at him and you say thank you. In that looking, there was stillness. Just thank you. There was no judging. There was just a field of presence. That means you truly met another human being. You connected at a deeper level. And it's only possible when you are not lost or react to the world of form. The form of that person, which is either the person's body, or the person's external appearance, or the person's psychological form. And then you say, whatever, I don't like the way he spoke to me, or whatever, or I like, I don't. A space of no thought, a space of consciousness in the interaction, just looking or listening to what he or she says. But of course the awareness goes beyond the looking and the listening. There's actually a flow of energy between you. There's a totally different energy interaction that would be there when in a normal interaction would be mind energy, just 2 minds. And here you have very different frequency between 2 humans. It's peaceful, a peaceful, alive energy field that connects them, in which they momentarily become one. And even if the other human has no idea that what's going on, he or she may simply feel that you are, such a, later and say, that's such a nice person. Because the human mind would then personalize it. In your presence, that human being felt suddenly free, not judged. Him or herself, a bit more than usual, felt, you didn't impose what normally humans impose on other humans. Similar to a dog or a cat, but better. And so they may even invite you for a cup of tea. Come home with me for a cup of tea. I'd like to be around you. Well, they may not say that because the mind is fearful of true relationship. And depending what country you're in, when you meet a stranger, you will encounter varying degrees of protectiveness, self-protectiveness of the ego. In some countries it's more open, and this often has very simple causes, like how cold or warm it is. Because if in a cold country, generation and generation in a cold country become tight and there's tension in the body. They have to protect themselves, not only psychologically, but also physically. The two get mixed up. And so in some countries, you talk to a stranger at a bus stop, they take 2 steps backwards. He's talking to me, a stranger. And there's a suspicion immediately he wants something from me. Because that's the ego thinks in those terms. He wants something from me. Smiling, in some countries it's frowned upon. You're smiling at somebody. In some places where there's still a little bit less mind identification, they smile more. I had a friend from the Philippines, and she came to England for the first time when I was living there. And the first few days and weeks she had great difficulties, because when she was walking along the street she smiled at everybody. And she was quite good looking, so the car screeching to a halt next to her, "Come in." She didn't want to come in, she was just happy. So I had to tell her, "You can't smile here." And that's meeting strangers, being theirs. And then, even more challenging, meeting humans with whom you share a lot of past. The more past you share with them, the more the old behavior patterns will want to come back in. You know that with meeting your parents, your wife, your husband, after many years of marriage. Patterns get very established of who you think he is, who he thinks you are, and the way in which you interact. Or more difficult, meeting your ex-husband or your ex-wife. And be present then and there. And be in the body. So you're meeting human beings without past. Not that you cannot remember certain things they did, but not to bring the past as an active operating principle into the interaction. Meeting everyone without past, just in this moment, through the power of this moment, which is the power of presence, which is who you are. And not meeting the other person as a walking personal history. And that is an enormously liberating thing to do when you can meet even your mother and father, with whom quite a few people, some people have a wonderful relationship with their mother and father, which is beautiful. Some grew up in a relatively conscious family. And many in this world did not grow up in a conscious, their father and mother were manifesting varying degrees of unconsciousness. And resentment built up over the years, so many between adult children and parents, often this grievances, resentments, complaints. He doesn't understand me, I get criticized all the time. He doesn't even want to understand me, my father, my mother. And the same reactions happen every time you visit them. And then you have a fight, and then you leave, and next time it happens again. And then one day you meet them, you arrive at the doorstep, and you look at them and feel the inner body at the same time. And then you come in and you sit down, and you look at them, still feeling the inner body, because now it's vital that you're anchored in that now. And then you get the old thing, your father says, "Are you still involved in that spiritual airy-fairy nonsense?" Still haven't got a job, have you? I told you years ago you should be doing this and that. And then you have to be very present. sit there and simply say, well, yes, I'm still doing that, yeah. So. But then he, if it's your father, or she, if it's your mother, after a while will feel a slight disorientation because you are not feeding the old patterns anymore. You're not reacting. And his or her ego will feel there's something missing here. And so it will be hard for them to keep up that playing out that script if the other one isn't playing anymore, isn't reacting anymore, simply stating this is how it is. And you don't even expect anything anymore, because expectations that he or she should behave in a particular way to make me happy is to do with being identified with certain thoughts. That's how things should be. He should understand me so that I can be happy. The whole thing is an illusionary edifice. You won't be happy even when he understands. It won't make any real difference to you. Now he understands me, so now what? What has changed? Nothing. He doesn't understand me, so it's the same, nothing. So you become free of that which you thought you needed when you were identified with thought. In presence, you don't really need anything psychologically speaking. You don't need psychological this or that. And there you are, and then you can see the patterns in your mother or father crumbling. And for the first time, perhaps, he or she will ask you a genuine question. What are you really into? What is that? This has happened. People have told me these miracles happen. And if they don't, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter. With presence comes an acceptance, a compassionate acceptance of what is, which very often means what is the human being in front of you. A compassionate giving them space to be, because presence is you have found your inner space or spaciousness, formless consciousness, peace as presence. There's also presence is not confined to the inner. Ultimately, it's just an artificial division between inner and outer. There's presence in the room, a field of presence. So it's within and without. So this is an entry point into presence. As we sit here, as you sit here, can you sense your own presence? That's not a very good way of putting it, because it's not your own. You don't even exist as a separate entity, as separate from the totality. Can you sense? But let's just for the moment put it like that. Can you sense your own presence? Is the feeling of your inner energy field. Alive. Cells are alive. When you feel that, you can't think very much. The moment you start to think, you lose that, because consciousness moves up and you're up here There is something that one cannot grasp or say, here it is. Because if you say, here it is, you've made an object out of it in consciousness, a concept, an idea. Here it is. And yet presence is consciousness itself. So you can never say, here it is. Who is saying here it is? All you can say is, here I am. Throughout the body, because presence is not a head phenomenon. Head is part of it, but so are the toes and the entire energy field. Presence is a whole body phenomenon, although it transcends the body and it's not part of the phenomenal world. But whatever words we use come from the phenomenal world, so it's okay. So